There we go.
All right, so who we got in the room? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is 8:30 p.m. Thank you everyone for joining us. I have been had an interesting, let's say, interesting 2 hours being stuck in Jeddah traffic. I'm in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia now, and thankfully found a spot to kick off this webinar. Let's see what we got here. So if you're here, please, would love to. This is a Careers Masterclass. I would love to know what career you guys will be in. Oh, I'm getting your bonus barista content. Listen, I've got some amazing cappuccino right now, which I won't show you because I'm going to spill all over my laptop. But yeah,
We should try.
I think it's.
See what happens.
All right. So if you guys, since you guys are here, I'd love to hear what. So of course, your name is already displayed. Everybody, make sure you type to everyone, and make sure you tell us what career you are in, and kind of your biggest career question that shall we discuss today. So this is an info session about the upcoming Careers Masterclass, but we'll also be covering some great content. Omar, for those who know Omar, mashallah, he's somebody who I personally look up to and have learned a lot from over the years. He is my mentor, advisor. Whenever I'm stuck with something, he's the person I turn to a lot to ask questions, hard questions. He gives them really hard answers. And I'm so honored to work with Omar to basically launch something we've been speaking about for, gosh, a while. I think more than 6 months, Omar.
Yeah, easy.
6 months. So I guess let's start off there. While people are typing in what career they're in, so Modu is in healthcare, and kind of the biggest career question they have, kind of what was the intention behind this masterclass? What was the biggest intention we had in mind? Like we said, we need to do this. What was the thing that was driving us to do this masterclass?
So maybe if we rewind a little bit, right? I think early in my career, there are certain challenges, right? Like I think there's a couple of, there's always multiple factors that are influencing you. And I think one thing I posted online the other day was what are your expectations of yourself in your career, but then what are everyone else's expectations, right? And I think that's a good place of starting, because there's for again, let's just be real about it. For a lot of us, especially Desi kids like me, your career expectations first are set by your parents, right? Which is not so much what are you passionate about, what do you want to be when you grow up, but here's a list of approved things you can do. If you don't do them, you're a failure, right? And so validation starts very early in the sense of, if you're not a doctor, lawyer, engineer, what are you? I remember I was majoring in computer science, and we went back to Pakistan one summer, and my grandmother was asking me what are you studying? And I was like, oh, computers. And she was like, she didn't understand what that meant, and so she wasn't sure if this was something good or if I was throwing my life away. And then I was like, engineer, but I'm like, it's engineering. She's like, engineering. I'm like, yes, engineering. She's like, okay. She relaxed, okay, that's fine then, right? Saved, right? So
Not a shame on the family.
There's family expectations of your career. There are expectations you have of yourself, right? Hey, this is what I want to do. This is the kind of thing that I like. There's expectations, not just of what you do, but also what your career is going to become. So I think for some people, they go through a struggle where, I think for some people, let's use this as an example, as they become more religious minded, perhaps, right? And I think a lot of people, especially in the US, kind of underwent that journey of, we grew up, we had Sunday school and all of these things, but those of us that are, a little bit older, right, kind of the 30s, 40s-ish, we didn't have a lot of opportunities when we were younger that exists now. Right now, there's there's a culture of taking a year or 2 years off and studying Arabic or doing Islamic studies, and then going back into medical school or whatever it is that they're doing, and they kind of get that grounding. For a lot of us, we didn't have that, so we were already working while getting some basic religious education through weekend seminars and online classes and all these types of things. And so expectations then changed. Okay, is my career holding me back from being a better Muslim? Right? How much time am I spending to this versus time that I'm spending on my, let's say, religious development and religious study, right? That's one struggle. There's the the thing that our parents was like the Deen and Dunya struggle. How are you balancing your Deen and Dunya? And so the career automatically, because if you've grown up with that understanding Deen versus Dunya, right? Like in college, no, don't take too many Islamic classes because right now you need to focus on Dunya, not on your Deen. You can focus on Deen later. And so you grow up and you're programmed to think, you're conditioned to think that a career by definition is a dunyawi type of thing. And so it therefore has no akhirah benefit. And so you walk in saying, okay, this thing that I do for 8 hours a day has nothing to do with my religion. Not because we've consciously arrived at that conclusion, but that's just essentially what people have been telling us for so long. And so then it's like, okay, well, if this is a dunya thing, one, how much effort should I be putting in? How much time and sacrifice should I be putting into learning it and advancing? And is there any actual utility in doing that? Two, in order to get ahead, do I need to not act like a Muslim? Do I need to, act like everyone else is doing and shamelessly self-promote and backstab and politic and, outwork and out hustle everyone else to get ahead? Like, is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, so there's no real understanding of what the right expectation is. And then beyond that, your kids have an expectation, which is, I don't care what you do. I don't know what you do, but how much time is it taking away from me? Right. Spouse maybe is similar, right? With the spouse, it maybe it's a little bit different. It's, yes, there's a timing factor, but then there's also ability to provide, right? What type of lifestyle are we getting with this, investment in career, right? That's a very real practical question. There's expectations from society. What culturally, and when I say culturally, I mean American culture. I don't mean our ethnic culture, but the American culture is, Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad, my name is Omar. What do you do for a living? What do you do for a living, right? It's the first question, such that career shapes identity to some extent, right? So there's all these expectations, there's all of these things out there that, whether we realize or not, they're affecting how we think and approach career development, what our goals are, where we should be advancing, what we should be doing. That's kind of the starting point, right? Is, what are the mindsets I need to have in approaching my career? What are the expectations I should be setting? What is the, and I don't want to say what is the harmonization of my career with my faith, but it's more, let's start from a Muslim first perspective, right? Muslim first means I'm created to worship Allah as He has told us in the Quran. And now from that very basic premise, how does the career now fit into that life purpose? So I'll pause there and see if, Mohammed, if you've got any thoughts.
No, so again, just to recap, so again, I think you started just to make sure everyone's on the same page here. So number one, the biggest factor is that we kind of set these correct expectations for ourselves. When we set those correct expectations, yes, there was the family pressure, but also the kind of worldview we had, the mindset we had, that there's this dunya, there's akhirah, right? And then we go to work, because we go to work with this mindset, oh, this is dunya, we may be inadvertently holding ourselves back in our careers and not really putting in that sort of, not even putting the work, right? And one of the, for me, I remember when we first started discussing this Careers Masterclass, something you said that kind of clicked with me was, how can work and our careers become part of our spiritual development? And that really resonated with me, because it's so easy to, like I said, have this like, okay, 8 or 9 hours, whatever, I'll forget about it. And then khair, I'll do my ibadah later, my spiritual development outside of work. But how every meeting you go into, every interaction you have, every project you work on is actually part of spiritual development. If you can speak to that, I mean, that's a very powerful.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the main motivations for doing this class, right? There's a, there's like the cliche that you hear in khutbahs that, oh, your work is ibadah if you do it with the right intention. So if I intend to support my family, my career is actually worshiping Allah. So, okay, what are the boundaries of that? What does that look like at deeper than the surface level? So now, does that mean if I just work 80 hours a week, I'm, qanitun, I'm just like, it's like I'm praying all night and fasting all day because I'm putting in an 80-hour work week? Like, what does that actually mean, that my work is worship, right? What's a healthy way of understanding that? I think that's the important question. So it's beyond just, I have the intent of supporting my family and doing good, therefore, alhamdulillah, now all my career is good deeds. Like, okay, that, yes, I think everyone kind of gets that point. But I think there's something a little bit deeper in the sense of how, again, I want to go back to the idea of compartmentalization, right? Whereas me thinking that my work is something that is purely worldly or of only worldly benefit, how do I turn it into something else, right? And that could be a combination of things. It could be a combination of my learning and developing skills that are of use beyond my career, right? That's one. I think there's an aspect of, everyone's been given certain blessings and talent. And so might be a little bit of a different way of looking at it, but for a lot of us, especially those that are working, when I say quote unquote, like an information job, essentially a job where you sit at your computer, right? So not even white collar, but it's just you're at your computer, whether you're doing accounting, whether you're doing data analytics, whether you're doing project management, whether you're in sales, account representative, it doesn't matter what role you have, but in all of these roles, like you're learning different things that can, serve you in different ways, or you have somehow been blessed with a set of skills that, essentially, again, maybe living in America just empowers you or enables you to make significantly more money, right? Like there's just that fact that if you're a hedge fund manager, you've been given some ability to make a ton of money. And so there is this idea that you've been blessed, not with the money itself, but you've been blessed with a certain level of intellectual talent, right? Ability, that an opportunity that other people don't have. So one is viewing those things as a blessing and seeing like, okay, I have an imana to now fulfill, or to implement or appreciate these blessings in the best way possible. I think that's certainly one part of it, right? And this might be a little bit of a different way of thinking about it, but it's the skills, it's the blessing of the opportunity, but then it's also, are you getting things that help you make a larger contribution? And the larger contribution doesn't always have to be Islamic work. Just because I learned marketing in my corporate job doesn't mean I have to now market Islamic programs in order to get, good reward. It honestly, it might be something that we don't necessarily see as religious, right? And so as much as we make fun of the idea of going into medicine, someone can make a very real akhirah impact for themselves purely through the work that they're doing in helping and treating people, right? And the same goes for other professions as well. It might not be as clear cut, but the ability to make that impact is definitely there.
Very powerful. I see some questions coming in, which are very, very powerful. I think a few people love saying about the idea of balance, right? Again, I think when we think about balance, we have this. You can speak to that idea that balance means, my religious identity is one thing, my work is one thing, and sometimes I think balance can be this. Honestly, it can be elusive, because if you're talking about an integrated way of life where you're not compartmentalizing, where you are acting through your faith at work, at family, then the word balance goes out of the window in a way. In a sense, it's not about balance anymore. It's about holistically approaching your life and saying, and the way I operate at work, the way I operate my family, the way I operate in the masjid is exactly the same person. I'm not trying to kind of spin wheels and trying to kind of balance across them, so to speak. But then there's, of course, the practical side of things where, let's say, work takes a lot of time, for example. The practical things where the demand, right? If you want to move up your career, you have to sacrifice family, sacrifice even prayers for some people, right? So can you speak to balance and how our elusiveness, us trying to get to that balance sometimes might be counterproductive, I guess, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, so you kind of touched on, there's a lot of different ways of looking at balance, right? So the first level is obviously time. And I work-life balance has become too much of a buzzword almost, right? Like, work-life balance. And now that everyone's working remotely, there's no work-life balance, right? Like, okay, that's certainly one component. And that one's honestly a little bit easier to deal with, because that really just comes down to you setting some boundaries. What do I feel I'm comfortable doing versus not doing? And there's also recognition that work-life balance is not going to be the same for everyone, right? if you know anyone that is involved in education, whether they're a teacher or the school principal or whatever the case may be, their work-life balance is much worse sometimes than a corporate professional. So a corporate professional can just clock in, do their hours of work and be done and not look at anything else again. But for someone that's teaching or involved in a school, it's all consuming, right? And so maybe that balance in terms of time is not there. However, what you will find is that there's usually a buy-in from the family, right? And so the family will say, hey, we understand the importance of what you're doing. We're all on board. And so whatever sacrifices are being made in terms of extra time and so on, everyone is on the same page, right? That's one thing. It's different if I am now presented with an opportunity like, hey, Omar, we're going to give you a 75% increase in salary, and we're going to increase your bonus and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we're going to give you this next level job title. You're going to become a vice president, but you've got to travel every week, Monday to Friday, out to client sites, right? It's like, okay, now the family has to figure out, are we all on the same page in terms of what that balance looks like, right? Like, is that sacrifice worth it? And I think that's where the Islamic grounding comes into play, because if you accept that your purpose, and this is what oftentimes happens in the environment and culture that we live in, is that success is defined as maximizing your earning potential or maximizing your career opportunity. And so if that is the framework and the paradigm by which I operate, well, then it's almost a no-brainer. Like, yes, I'm going to go and do that thing because clearly I have the potential to be that VP making that salary. Then I need to do it, because that, if I don't, I'm going to see myself as a failure, right? And for a lot of people, as they move later in life, they realize that maybe that sacrifice wasn't worth it. And so our hope is that we bring those questions to the forefront of helping people realize, like, okay, how do I actually want to design this and think about it and approach it in a healthier way, right? Like, that's one part of balance. The other part of balance, like you said, is your internal balance in the sense of who you are and how you act, right? And so, you know, there's that saying, right? Don't be Musa at the masjid and Fir'aun at home, right? Like, don't be two-faced in that sense. But, you know, I've seen some very interesting examples. I have seen people who at work, because of their Muslim character and the way that they conduct themselves, you know, kind of with that ethic and adab, people pick up on it. And they'll say, like, hey, that person is always like so calm and collected, even when things are crazy. What's different about that person? Like, well, that person's Muslim. They're just always calm. They don't freak out, right? So that brings a level of balance to your work. The other side of that coin is I've seen people in a masjid board come in and be very demanding and very loud and extremely aggressive, because and people that are accustomed to doing community work are immediately like, whoa, what the heck are you doing? Why, you know, this is not how we operate. This is not the way that we're supposed to act. And that person can't put two and two together, because when they're at work, that's how they get results, is by being loud and demanding and aggressive. And so they think that that's the way that they're supposed to act, because that's what's gotten them success. And so a large part of this balance, the idea of balance, is not just like, oh, I'm not going to check my email after 5 p.m. Like, dude, everyone already knows that stuff. But we really want to step it back and say, like, how are we understanding how we define success, what it looks like for us and our family in light of our identity as Muslims, and then using that to determine how we make those other decisions.
Love that. The work that this Careers Masterclass is basically, what I like about it, what I love about it is it's a very practical, pragmatic approach to careers, right? Because so far, like, in our community, there's been people say, oh, go all in your careers, ignore Islamic faith and just go all in.
Yep.
And others have said, you know, just do the basic minimum, you know, get the job, do the thing, but just focus on your religious identity. What you're trying to do in the Careers Masterclass is saying, no, you know, advance in your careers, push yourself in your careers, but within Islamic framework, within that balance spoken about. And I think that's very powerful, because many people, you know, are stuck in their careers and have stagnated in their careers, and they use faith as an excuse to be stuck. It's like, oh yeah, because I don't want to brag.
And one thing I want to explore in the class, and I kind of got this tone from a couple of the questions of like, I'm not where I want to be, or like I'm, not progressing where I want to, and so on. And it's like, well, who said? Who said you're not progressing? Who set the standard of where you're supposed to be? Like, when we say that we're failing and we're not getting to where we're supposed to be, who defined that? Where did that definition and standard come from? And one thing that's very interesting to me is the idea that I think a lot of time, I'll say for me, I won't say for anyone else, I'll say for me, when I have felt like that, and given that I got some gray hair in my beard now, I can look back and say, like, actually, that was me setting unrealistic expectations for myself, or me holding myself to a standard that maybe no one else was holding me to. And so I think that's part of it, is like, well, who said that you're supposed to be at XYZ position or role or whatever it is by X amount of time? Everyone's journey and path is different. And I think that definition of where I'm supposed to be really needs to be rethought. You're muted.
Sorry. So for the person who feels stuck in their career or struggling to approach to do that, like I said, do that spiritual work at work, so to speak, you're offering this masterclass, Careers Masterclass, through 5 pillars. We can just walk through those 5 pillars and what each pillar is supposed to do to that person, and hopefully unlock in their minds.
Yeah, so the first will be mindsets. And I think a lot of what we've talked about so far has been mindsets, right? And so it's going through that idea of the expectations, right? How am I defining success? What am I looking at? And so on. And also breaking down some of, when we say mindsets, what we mean is the lens by which you are interpreting what's happening to you, right? And so are you viewing things from, Deen versus Dunya, right? Baraka culture and hustle culture, those are mindsets. Abundance mindset and scarcity mindset. Growth mindset and fixed mindset, right? These are all things that come up through how we are thinking about things. One thing that is kind of a small preview of the class, as I was kind of putting my notes together, something about fixed mindset really, really resonated with me, which was a lot of times we will procrastinate or not put in, our best, right? Not do work with ihsan, all of these things, so that if we fail, we can always say it's like, oh, it's because I didn't do this, right? We almost pre-make the excuse that we have. And one of the biggest fears of someone that has a fixed mindset is the fear that you might try your best and it's still not enough. And that is a really scary thought for people, because when a lot of times when you feel that idea of feeling stuck is, I've done my best, or I feel that I've done my best, and I still haven't progressed past a certain point. And that's a very difficult feeling to sit with, that I gave it my best and it wasn't good enough. Does that mean this is my limit? Is this just where I capped out? Like, I'm just meant to be at this level and never move ahead because I gave my best effort and nothing else happened, right? And so a lot of self-doubt creeps in. And so reframing a lot of that through a growth mindset to overcome those self-limiting beliefs and finding a different way of looking at it, like, that's going to be the focus on the mindsets part of it. Then we're going to look at soft skills. So what are the things that I need to do to get better, right? And so I think for a lot of people, especially if you're mid-career, you kind of realize that what technical skills sort of even out at a certain point, right? Like, an accountant can do what an accountant does, a pharmacist can do what a pharmacist does, but what differentiates is all of the other stuff. And so we'll look at what is the other stuff. How do I even figure out what is it that I need to work on? And once I do, so for example, let's say I've read all these Harvard Business Review articles and they're saying that the most in-demand skill is people with a curious mindset. Well, what does that mean? Like, how do I develop a curious mindset? How do I become more curious and ask more interesting questions? Like, what the heck? Like, it's very easy to read these advices and then just look and be like, okay, how am I supposed to apply for a job and say, yes, I ask very curious questions, therefore you should hire me because this is your new in-demand skill? Like, this will become a common theme for everyone. I hate a lot of this advice that's published because it doesn't mean anything. How do you actually implement this and do something with it? Doesn't make sense sometimes. And so I want to actually deep dive, like, hey, what are these soft skills? How do you actually work at them and develop them? And how do you maybe chart progress and see, like, yes, I've gotten better at this thing, or I've maybe not moved ahead on this thing. We're going to look at teams. So not just how to lead teams and create a good team culture, but look at how to be a good teammate, right? So it's not always about leading, but it's how can I impact a team that I'm working on? What if I'm not getting along with people? How do I show vulnerability and ask for help without looking incompetent, right? Like, those are very real questions that we struggle with, especially when we are moving into new situations. And the funny thing is, like, that never goes away. I was talking to someone that is a VP at a large company, and he was like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, everyone thinks I've got it figured out, but I haven't figured it out. I don't know why they put me here. I have no idea what anything that I'm doing is, it's not something that people share openly, but even people that have moved up, progressed very high, still struggle with those things. And so we'll look at, how to showcase that and how to get help and be someone that people want on their team. I think that's a large part of it too, right? And then we will look at leadership. We'll break out leadership from a prophetic perspective, right? Breaking down from what the Prophet taught us about leadership, and then looking at a couple of the core qualities, competencies, and practically implementing it, right? And so practically implementing it isn't just that leaders are always humble and leaders are always kind and leaders are always like, no, sometimes situations are different and you have to adapt. And the ironically, part of prophetic leadership is that you have to adapt to the situation at hand, right? And so sometimes compassion is called for. Sometimes accountability is called for. How do you hold someone accountable while still empathizing with them, right? So we want to kind of look into those things, that what does leadership actually look like when it's practiced? And then the fifth module is personal branding, right? Like, what is your story? It's that phrase like, oh, I need to get we had a hailstorm here a few months ago, right? I need to get my roof replaced. Oh, I got a guy, right? I got a guy, the roof guy. Like, well, what guy are you at the company? Right? Like, what is your story? Like, I am the multi-talented person who's good at multitasking and familiar with Excel and Access and PowerPoint, and I'm good at account management, and I have strong leadership and communication skills. That's the guy I am. Like, no, that doesn't make any sense, right? That might be on a resume, but what is your actual branding? What is the one, thing that people are thinking of when they talk about you when you're not there? What is it that when a project comes up, hey, we've got this 6-month project that has all these components. Oh, Muhammad would be great for X. What is X? Is X something that you think that you're good at and you tell people, yes, I'm the guy for X? Or is X something that you had no idea that people were associating you with, right? That's a very real problem. So we want to go into the branding aspect of it, not just, in terms of your reputation in your company, but how do you control that perception, right? How do you take steps to change people's opinion of you if you've been branded a certain way? How do you tagline yourself when applying to other positions, right? So if I've always been in one type of a role, I've always been in an operations environment. I've always done operational work, but there's a sales role that I'm really excited about, and I want to transit and I want to apply to the sales role. How do I tell a story that makes them be like, oh yeah, this person might, is worth exploring at least? What is it that I can say about myself that makes them overlook the fact that I have no experience with this, to say, well, actually, here's something that I've done that makes me a fit for this other thing that I want to do that maybe it doesn't look like it to you, right? And so personal branding, reputation, that'll be part of it. And then that's the core curriculum. And then I think we've got the premium modules, which one is job interviews. So going into detail on not just like how did like, oh, what is your biggest weakness? Like, okay, yeah, like everyone, you can Google the answers to that one. What I'm interested in is the shift to behavioral interviewing and helping people go through their own experiences and create stories, right? I think that this is part that's not talked about enough, is that to interview well, you need to have good stories. You need to be able to tell a good story about yourself. That starts with your branding, right? I'm the guy that does X. That's the first part of it. But then it's, tell me about a time that you had to deal with a difficult situation. Tell me about a time where you were behind on a deadline. Tell me about a time where you had a conflict with a coworker, right? A lot of job interviewing is not going to be, well, tell me what you did when you worked at Microsoft, and you get to just make up whatever you want. But it's more, they want to know, you had a conflict with a coworker. What did you do? So I want to actually work with helping people identify and create little stories that can teach, little stories that can communicate different types of lessons based on the question being asked. And what ends up happening is, of course, stories are always more memorable than information. And so if you're able to interview and story tell about yourself well, there's a much higher chance of you getting that offer, right? And then we'll additionally have a deep dive on prophetic leadership, just purely from that seerah perspective.
Love it. And I'm sure everyone's now hearing people, when I said Careers Masterclass product Muslim, may thought we are putting together like, oh, how do you be a Muslim at work, right? Kind of traditional kind of fiqh questions about how do you ask for a prayer room, all that stuff. Like, this is a crash course in career development from an Islamic angle. This is what I love about this. Like, literally, you're getting a crash course, no matter where you are in your career, whether you are a young professional, whether you're about to get into a career, whether you're mid-level career, or somebody who's reached like a manager, senior leader, and wants to kind of break through. This is a crash course in career development that is faith-based, but also really practical. And also what I love on Omar's style, I'm sure you all kind of like know Omar by now, so you know him very well. He's very contrarian, right? So he calls out the BS. That's why I was going to write an article and send it to Omar first. If he likes it, if I get a thumbs up, I mean, it's really good. If I get it's okay, it means all right, it'll pass. But nobody tells us it's terrible. He just tells me off my face. So that's Omar, and that's something you need. You need that kind of hard advice that is practical, that is in your face, that says, hey, if you want to move ahead in your career, this way you need to move. And sorry for the background. I'm in a coffee shop right now. So before I know some of you who are interested in the Careers Masterclass, again, Omar just walked through all the 5 modules. We're really excited about this. This is the first time that we're really, really empowering Muslims to advance their careers, but not from the traditional perspective, but really with a grounded in faith. So it's almost like it's both. Here's what I love about this masterclass. It's not just saying, okay, here's some HBR stuff you should do to advance your careers, but actually ways that incorporate that struggle we all have as Muslims, doing the spiritual work while advancing our careers. And I think it's very, very powerful. And I'm really excited about this first cohort that will go with Omar through this. And Omar just went through the 5 modules, the mindsets, the soft skills, the teams, the leadership, personal brand, and of course, the working sessions. Omar, maybe you can talk about the working session, what you exactly do in the working sessions. Working sessions are also available for those who even purchase Essential Edition. So what are the working sessions exactly?
So the working sessions will be more activities, right? Like, part of I'm most comfortable teaching where I just get to talk and no one interrupts me, right? That doesn't necessarily work so well on Zoom. So I'm going to try my best to build in participation and questions and things like that. I think, but one thing that we realized as we were planning this is, in targeting professionals, you are going to have a crowd of people who are all accomplished in their own respect, right? In different ways. And there is a lot to learn simply from the experiences and perspectives of everyone else, because anyone that's a practicing Muslim that has advanced to whatever extent in their career, they've taken some lumps, right? They've gone through some serious ups and downs to get to wherever it is that they are. Whether it's within work or outside of work, right? Like, everyone's gone through some stuff. And so I think with the working sessions, it's important to get as many perspectives as we can. So the idea is, having some activities, right? Whether it's like a case study or just like a whiteboarding type of activity or discussion or, something like that. But, it might be all together. It might be breaking people out into smaller groups, but just having more interactive elements where we're taking something and walking through it and getting the opportunity to learn from everyone else in the group.
I'm actually particularly some of the case studies. I was discuss some of the case studies that you have, and yes, there is a sports case study, of course, which I had to translate to me. But really, there's some really great case studies. I think learning through case studies, and I mean, these case studies some of them have been discussed as well. In fact, everyone's discussing. You can read about them, but what would it look like from an Islamic angle? And perhaps, we come with a much more powerful question. So I'd love to see what comes out of the case studies. I'd love to hear people's thoughts. I hear Sulaiman already saying love it already, and mashallah, I think there's a lot here that honestly, it's very, very unique angle. And it took me a while to understand where Omar was coming from. And when he clicked on, oh my God, this is so needed for people who are in the professional careers and where they want that professional advice, they want that practical advice, they want that stuff that actually makes sense, what makes sense for them pragmatically, but also they want it grounded in their faith, and not just some dude kind of putting them further down to hustle culture or and Dunya paradigm. So the way it works for those who know our masterclasses, these are 2 live sessions per week. So it's a bit intense, but I think it'll be very powerful. 2 live sessions per week for 5 weeks. And then if you miss a live session, don't worry, we send the recording within 48 hours by email. And of course, you have lifetime access, not just to this masterclass, but inshallah, if this goes well, whenever Omar does it again. So you have any future updates to this masterclass, you have lifetime access to it, inshallah. There are 2 packages. There's the essential package, which goes to the 5 weeks, which are 2 sessions per week. So it's 10 sessions total, not just 5 sessions, 10 sessions total. Q&A time each session. There's a private online discussion forum, and as I said, live access to future updates. And for those who decide to do the premium package, then you have the professionals bookshelf, which for those of you know, Omar Usman used to run our book club in Barakah Academy before, and his choice of books, I asked him for references of what books to read. So he's the person to go to think about books to read. So you got the professional bookshelf, list of recommended books for your career, professional resource, articles, podcast episodes for talent development, and then deep dive sessions. One is on job interviews. The second one is prophetic leadership, inshaAllah. And like I said, there are 2 price points for this. One is $595, so it was $995. And we are introducing for the first time a 10-month installment plan to make it as affordable as possible, to make it something that's not too heavy on the budget. I know that people with careers sometimes, budgeting and salaries and all the expenses we have as people run families and run expenses can be difficult. So try to make it as affordable as possible, spreading over 10 months to Ta'ala so that all of you shall be able to join us for these sessions. If you want to sign up for, let us know. And we have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So basically, you can sign up, you can try the first 2 sessions. If you don't like it, email us, we'll refund you. If you join the installment plan, we'll just cancel your plan and you don't have to get charged again. But I hope you do join inshaAllah. I want to take the next few minutes, answer some of the questions that come through in the Q&A. And I know that people have, go ahead, Omar.
Oh, do you want me to take some of the, go ahead. I saw a couple of Q&A questions I wanted to answer real quick.
Actually, I want you to pick up the ones you want to answer.
Okay, so let me start. First one is, what is your opinion about a side hustle or side income in pursuing another interest? And I would say it's fine. It's just, you have to figure out your priorities, abilities, etc., and see if it's something that you can fit in. I'm all for side hustles, but it also has to be done kind of in a healthy way where you're not working yourself to death, obviously. And there's also some additional purpose to the side hustle. Sometimes it's purely financial, and that's fine, right? But you just have to know, what are my intentions in getting into it, why I'm doing it, and so on. But yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the side hustle. But just like with almost every, one thing that's become a common theme is it has to fit into your priorities, your life, your family situation, and so on. And really only you can figure out what that looks like. What is working for one person is not going to work for someone else. My capacity to take on a side hustle or how many hours or what it would look like will probably be much different from someone else's. And so a lot of times they're not rules of thumb of like, oh, you should do this or shouldn't do that. but it's going to be, does it fit into these other things? And that's it. Really, that's the focus of the class. Is I want to clearly define for myself what all those parameters are, and then see how I fit everything else into it. How to pray salah in the workplace in a non-Muslim environment. So again, another caveat. I will speak from an American perspective, and if you know anything about the American perspective is that America exists and we don't know anything about anybody else. And so I can only speak to the situation here, which is that, alhamdulillah, I've never had any problems with it. I think, there is an expectation of employers making generally reasonable accommodations. And so if you need to ask someone for a place to pray, like, they should provide that. Or, one thing that I would do in the office, I would just book a meeting room. I would book a meeting room for 30 minutes and I would just go in there and pray with the door closed. And then that was that. And, no one needed to know what I was doing or anything of that sort. It's just, I just went and prayed and that was it. So there's always different ways of getting around it. If you're getting pushback where the employer is resisting and not wanting you to pray, then that might be something that, maybe needs to go to another organization or an attorney or something of that nature. But in general, I don't know of anyone that's gotten pushback on needing to pray in the workplace. Like, even Jumada and stuff, most people are fairly reasonable about it.
Just that point, Omar, I think a lot of people, it may not be an issue about finding a place to pray. It's that, I hate to say this, but almost as Muslims, someone feel inferior or feel like, it's uncomfortable and maybe it will cause some issues down the road. That performance management, maybe it's yes, they'll say no problem, you can pray here. But like some people have this, we create this boogie monster in our mind that if I ask a to pray, then I might be rubbing off a perception about myself, and which might impact my career, right?
Yeah. So I'll be honest. I empathize with that perspective, because I personally am not the type of person to walk into work and being like, "Hi, I'm Omar. I'm Muslim. I do this. And to kind of put that on everyone. So if I don't, and I think in a lot of corporate jobs, right, though, especially the way that the cultures are shifting for what in-office work looks like and all of those things, a lot of times you don't need to say anything. And I would say, if you don't need to say anything, don't make an issue if you don't need to make an issue, right? And so if I have the freedom to just block a meeting room for 30 minutes and go pray, like, I should just go do it, right? Honestly, even for Friday prayer, I just block it out on my calendar so people know not to schedule a meeting at that time. And yes, there's been a couple of instances where someone was like, "Oh, hey, we've got this emergency thing. Can you come in on Friday?" I'll be like, "No, actually, I have to go to mosque at that time." And that ends the discussion. So I wouldn't make an issue if you don't need to. Usually there's a way to just go and find time to pray if you can. But if it becomes an issue, I would say that there's maybe pursue other ways of getting help. Advice on making our income 100% halal, taking extra breaks, or not putting forth full effort. That's a good question. I think it's a hard question as well. I think part of it is we have to almost redefine and maybe better understand what are the actual expectations being placed on me at work. And especially now, one thing that's interesting is with this shift toward wellness and mindfulness and, all these workplace initiatives geared at employee well-being. Why they're pushing all those is a whole different discussion, but that culture shift is there. I think it's understanding, like, I don't think anyone is expecting you to work, for 4 hours with only a 15-minute break. Like, that's fairly unrealistic. So I would redefine, like, what are the actual expectations of me, right? And that will come in more in check-ins with a manager, quarterly check-ins, things like that, where it's like, hey, am I performing to expectation or am I falling short somewhere? Like, if I'm falling short somewhere, then that's something that needs to be revisited. Even then, I don't know that I would immediately jump to saying that makes my income haram, right? A performance issue is not I'm being haram at work, right? It's a performance issue. So I think we need to kind of change the way that we look at that a little bit. In terms of halal and haram, like what you're doing, obviously, I think there's the obvious things. types of industries we shouldn't, or types of work we shouldn't be doing, and so on. But yeah.
Just on that note, I think also some of us grew up with the perception of, first of all, there's two sides. One is like when you were working for factories, right? Where literally every hour counted, because if you're not at the belt, doing output, then you are harming the employer. And there was that issue that your workers your income is not be halal because you're not really earning every hour, so to speak. But it's that the move to knowledge work is different. Secondly, also we hear the stories, right, of people who put extra time. That, oh wow, we I mean, as much as we put it, we kind of put these stories on, and we kind of romanticize the stories. But like I said, there's something to create this almost like burden on ourselves, because we have to think that way, and then it's not realistic, right? I might have a great idea in the shower, but it's not at work, right? Am I getting paid being in the shower? No, but it's important to get a shower so I can get that. So I feel like sometimes we need to be. This is what sometimes, as Muslims, we grew up with these romanticized stories of how to count hours, how making sure. But we gotta be careful with stories, because these stories, not be they're wrong. It's just that they might create this burden on our mind and may even hold us from advancing careers, basically.
Yeah, and I would also say, like, the nature of work has changed so much, right? Like, I've been in environments where, in a support environment, where there's expectation that, hey, if something that's flagged at a certain status level, like as a high severity or urgent severity, whatever, that the expectation is you respond within 30 minutes no matter what, right? Well, that's an expectation being set that you've agreed to. You need to uphold your end of it. There's other situations where, hey, you just get your work done, and in general be available between 8 and 5, like for meetings or for people pinging you, etc., like within a reasonable amount. Now, if within the course of that time you step out one day for an hour and 20 minutes for lunch, like, did you suddenly become like, no, like, that's the culture and the way that people work, and so it kind of balances out. So I would just take that in balance. I quit my job working as a doctor at my father's medical practice after getting burnt out after failing to achieve my father's standard and expectations. I want to forge my own path and career. Am I letting my family down Islamically in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's eyes? That's really, it's a tough situation and a tough question. And it really needs, I will share what I feel are some of the competing ideas, right? Or the ideas that are in tension with this question. So there is the idea of being good to one's parents, right? Being obedient to one's parents and so on. But what are the limits of that? Does that mean that they get to pick what it is that I do for a living, right? Is that an Islamically appropriate level of obedience and goodness to parents, or do I get to pick what my career is, right? What is letting someone down? Why am I letting them down? Is it, they're just sad that I'm not continuing on the family line of work? Is there spiritual manipulation involved, in the sense that, like, what the parents saying that what you're doing is haram because you're not listening to me, right? There's a lot of ideas in tension that, I'll be quite honest, I think it needs the input of an imam or scholar. I've started to maybe better identify some of these ideas that I think weren't talked about in as much detail, but I don't have a direct answer. And I think for an answer, a lot of these situations are so personal that it will need, the intervention of a qualified imam who can do that type of work to go through it. But it is I just want to emphasize, it's a tough situation with a lot of pressure, not just personal pressure, but there's family pressure. It becomes spiritual pressure. There's a lot going on, and it makes the situation extremely difficult. And so I have an appreciation for how hard it is. I wish I had a better answer to it.
If I may, Omar, I think this is a great question coming through right now. Some questions coming in right now. There's a question by Muhammad saying, is the course designed towards navigating the workplace as a Muslim, or how to succeed at working Muslim?
Navigating the workplace as a Muslim? I would say maybe more the latter, right? The answer is, we're coming from a Muslim foundation, and then learning how to navigate career from there, right? And so, yeah, I would say
Yeah,
we're starting.
it is a lot of
We're
yes.
starting from a foundational premise of I am a Muslim, and now I happen to need to go get a career. How do I now navigate this?
Well, I made a career and how to navigate and how my Muslim identity helps me as well. I see a lot of questions about will this course help people decide their careers if they have not yet decided? Because a few of these came through as well.
Yeah, I think that it will. When we get into some of the soft skills and personal branding aspects of it, and especially in the job interview, the extra job interview module, we'll talk about in all of those places, but we will talk about identifying where your strengths areas are, what type of work you enjoy, how to find the types of work that you might be a good fit for. And it, and the thing is that it's not so clear cut sometimes, because, I think for, again, those of us are a little bit older, right? We remember the idea of like aptitude tests. Like you just take this test and it tells you, oh, you should become an architect. Oh, you should become this. You should be like, it's not that clear cut. And quite honestly, the vast majority of us who are working knowledge jobs at any of these like Fortune 500 companies, the job titles we have didn't exist a few years ago. And they're being made up all the time. There was no head of machine learning, in 1990, probably not, right? But now like every company has a machine learning person and a machine learning team and all of these things. And so so it's going to be about identifying what type of work you are good at, what type of work you can derive meaning and purpose from, and then how to find roles that may align with it. So we will definitely be getting into some of that.
Awesome. I'm cautious of time. I want to make sure that we do wrap up on time. There's a great question here about how to balance between grateful and content versus wanting more for your career and financial growth. It feels contradicting.
That's a really good question. I don't think that contentment is necessarily at tension with ambition. And I think everyone can be ambitious to do more, but contentment, we talked earlier about the fixed mindset, right? That sometimes our biggest fear is I give something my best effort and I still don't quote unquote succeed at that thing. And I think there's a harmonization in the sense that I can be ambitious in terms of what I want to achieve, but I have to be content knowing that if I've given something my best effort, that maybe it's not going to work out, right? And that's part of the Islamic identity, is that, hey, I might give it everything that I've got and it's just not written for me, and that is a reality we have to deal with. Growing up, I had a lot of ambition to play in the NBA. It was my dream. It was my passion. I put in the 10,000 hours, right? I put in the work, but I'm 5'9" and I can't jump. Like it's just not written for me to do that. And so I can have the ambition, but I have to balance that with the contentment of what Allah has given me.
Now all you do is talk about basketball with me. All right. There's one more here. I love this. About finding your ikigai, right? The idea of sacrificing comfort to continue in a job that you hate to feed your family versus finding your purpose and passion, right? I think that'll be and again, this idea of emphasizing predestination roles, qadar, a lot of questions coming in about qadar and luck and, how does it work, inshallah? Like those sort of questions, basically.
The thing with qadar, like, I think there's a very good analogy that I think helps explain a lot of it, which is the risk of the bird is written, but the bird still has to fly out and leave the nest in the morning, right? Like yes, our risk is written, but we still need to, Allah has created the means as well. Just like my sustenance is written for me, I still have to pick up the food and put it in my mouth, right? So there is action, no matter what the risk is, there's still action that we have to undertake. Now, part of the action that we undertake is the understanding that I act with ihsan, I act with excellence. And so what does that look like, right? And so Allah has created these means of progressing and learning. And so I need to do those in the best way that I can. So I think that's part of it, is that we have to continually be seeking and working and, quote unquote, leaving the nest in the morning to find that risk. But then we balance it with the contentment that, hey, once I've given it my best shot, if I didn't get it, I didn't get it. And I move on. I don't get hung up on the idea that I failed and I'm terrible and, oh my God, what's going to happen? That's where then we're not being content, right? And then we're worse than not being content. We're beating ourselves up. So there is a lot of that kind of that element of God that actually kind of helps mellow you out and makes it easier to deal with when things don't necessarily work out the way that you perhaps had envisioned.
Love that. And again, just for those who join us, again, the Careers Masterclass starting by next Tuesday, InshaAllah. And this first time we're holding it, and I think it's going to be a empowering masterclass for those of you in your careers, whether you're young professionals about to start a career, whether you're mid-career professionals, or whether InshaAllah you are some of your senior professionals even, and you're struggling with some of the things, some of the concepts and some of the mindsets and leading teams. And you're always looking for how do you think about these issues and deal with the practical realities, right, of work and practical realities of careers from a faith perspective, then this type of masterclass will be for you. We recognize that a lot of people who follow us are in jobs, and I know that most of you have, are in that crunch of life, right? You're trying to figure out your careers, at the same time you have families and you have other responsibilities. And this masterclass, again, we're not promising you will get a promotion, but this masterclass is not the promise we're making. But we are promising you that this masterclass will equip you with a set of tools and practical guidance that, if you work on it, if you implement it, InshaAllah, will open doors. You'll be much better equipped than you were before at this masterclass. And even if you're somebody who's done some training at work or have taken some courses in the past in careers, really packing a lot. In fact, this is a course that you would wish you had when you first entered your job. So I'm really, really looking forward to having you all. Again, there's 2 packages to think about if you just consider. Both include the 10 sessions, and both have the working sessions. Both have the Q&A time after each session. And just difference is for those who want to go premium, you can have more resources and more deep dive sessions with Omar, including the one-on-one interview coaching with Omar, which is great. If you're preparing for a promotion or job, one-on-one interview with Omar would be very helpful. And like I said, for the first time, we are introducing 10-month installment plan to make these courses affordable as possible yourself. And hopefully you see the return for it, not in terms of your work, but also in terms of just how you are and how you become InshaAllah. Omar, any last words and last thoughts before?
No, maybe one question you can answer real quick. How long will the recorded videos be available to people if they can't attend live or different time zones and so on?
So if you register, you get lifetime access to the masterclass. So you have access to a learning portal. A learning portal, you see the videos. If you complete all the payments, you get access to the recordings. And as well, if for some reason you come back, for 1 or 2 years, you can review them. And if Omar runs another cohort with his Careers Masterclass, then you'll see the latest version of his masterclass. It's like you have live access to future updates with the masterclass as well. So we always, because this is investment in yourself, so it's not something it's like a one-off and they disappear. When you invest in this masterclass, you get the recordings and they're with you for life, InshaAllah. And the last time to register is the start of the class. It starts on next Tuesday. So please do register before the class starts so you don't miss out on any session, InshaAllah. All right. Omar, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, Jazakallah khair. Looking forward to seeing people in the class next week, InshaAllah.
Awesome. Well, Jazakallah khair, everyone. I hope you found this useful and beneficial and give you some ideas to really think through what does it mean to pursue a career, grounded, but also advancing, InshaAllah. So I'm hoping to see all of you and most of you in the masterclass. Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feekum. Omar, thank you so much for joining. And we're wishing you all the best in your masterclass starting next Tuesday, InshaAllah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Subhanakallah hamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.